So it is Friday, April 27th, 2018, and I want to welcome you to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with a look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and a look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, and simulcast on the Gwe, that's CKWE, the Gwe, in Tandanega. You can find our audio streaming at www.ltnradionet.com, and we are Facebook Live, so you can see our audio and video streaming live on Facebook. If you are checking us out and you want to find us, we're posted on a bunch of the group pages, but certainly we're posted on the Let's Talk Native with John Kane group page, and that's where you can find the program. And I will look at our Facebook live streaming for your comments, for your interaction, and for your thoughts, criticisms. Again, whether you agree, disagree, I'm probably gonna touch on some issues that not everybody's gonna agree with today. And look, that's what I do. As a part of my promo, we're going to talk a little bit of politics. I am John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer, and we opened up with a instrumental. What is it? Resonation from Pappy John's band. It's it sounds like an intro song, so we figured we'd use that. But before I get into it, though, I've got a couple things I want to mention. Our communities oftentimes go through periods where we have losses, and some communities are impacted almost like seems to be a rash of deaths. Akwesasne is one of those communities, and they've had a number of deaths recently, and it's really started to be a concern to people. Akwesasne lost a prominent person in terms of business and activism, with the Great Law Longhouse as well. Junior David, at 52 years of age, he passed away. I think it was just yesterday. And I know there was actually a benefit planned for tonight, and I assume that's still going on at the Longhouse in Akwesasne. On a personal note, my wife's grandmother passed away on Thursday while we were in New York. Thelma Cornelius, 90 years old. She was almost made her 91st birthday, and so my condolences go out to both the families, including the rest of my family, my wife's family, for Thelma, and of course for the family and community of for Junior David. Again, I've got fond memories of both. In particular, I've got fond memories of my wife's grandmother, who used to come out and visit with us. And again, I wanted to give a mention of respect and acknowledgement to two individuals who saw all their days with us. All right, now, let me get into it now. It's a season. The political season has started, and so there's always this question that many people raise about where Native people should sit with American politics. What's our role? I mean, should we participate? And of course, in that context, we're talking about, should we participate in their elections of their officials? Where it gets a little bit more convoluted is when Native people run for those offices. And this year, this political season, although some have already been eliminated, there's been a record number of Native people, Native women in particular, running for American offices, state legislatures, Congress. Perhaps even a few Senate spots, and there's even a candidate for governor. And I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about where that leaves us, and what that says about those individuals who have chosen to run in American politics, because we suffer from an identity crisis, and I talk about that all the time on the show. Are we Americans? That has to be, really at its core, has to be one of the questions. I mean, an example is the woman who's running for the governor for governor of Idaho, Paulette Jordan. She's running her kind of one of the campaign groups is called Really American. So she's running as a real American. And, you know, if you go to Wikipedia, look up Paulette Jordan, it says an American politician. It doesn't say native politician. It says an American politician. And, of course, not every native person who gets involved in running for office in American politics even starts off in their own quote unquote tribal government. She did. She was a part of the tribal council for Coeur d'Alene Reservation. So that's kind of where she first got bit by the bug, so to speak. But then she served in the Idaho State House of Representatives, and now she's running for governor. Now, here's where okay, so they're posting all this stuff on Facebook. They're saying, "Oh, look at they got a nice picture of Paulette Jordan up there, and asking for all of us to support her run for the governorship." Now, of course, most of us don't live in Idaho. So when they're saying all of us support, I don't know if they're talking about, again, prayers again, or if they're talking about money, just public relations or whatever. But I got to get to back to that place where I say, okay, she's not running to serve us. And if you don't believe me, let's check out the demographics of Idaho. Idaho is the 7th whitest state in the United States. Almost 90%, just below 90% of the population of Idaho is white. The native population represents a little above the national average. About 1.4% of the population of Idaho is native. Look, if she's running for, and she already has run for state office. If she's running for state office, she is not running solely on the native vote. And she better not be, because there's not enough there to get her elected. So if she's not running on the native vote, then she's acknowledging that the bulk of her constituency is white people. Now, if you want to break the demographic down a little farther, Idaho isn't exactly a blue state. They got a Republican governor sitting there now. The 2 senators are Republicans. I mean, to say it's a long shot and again, Paulette Jordan may be the nicest woman on the face of the earth. She may be a sweetheart. I mean, she may, her politics in terms of, her morality and ethics and everything else may be great as far as the American standards go. But here's the thing. She stopped serving the Coeur d'Alene and started serving the state of Idaho. She jumped ship. I mean, she jumped into American politics, leaving Coeur d'Alene behind. Now, we could argue that when these native politicians run for state office or national office, that somehow they're going to look after the native interest. Well, I'm sorry. That, by definition, is special interest politics. So to suggest that she's going to run for governor and she's going to have a keen eye out for the 1.4% of the population of Idaho, and she's going to take a native position over the 90%, of the population, the white position there. Well, if she's going to do that, she ain't going to get elected, first off. But so I mean, this is the part that gets so complicated with all this stuff. And the problem is, this isn't just about the ambition of an individual native person running for American office. The problem is they're expecting, and the expectation is that we're all going to get sucked along with it. When Diane Humatiwa was first, her name first came up as a federal judge, Barack Obama, put her up as a federal judge in Arizona, and nominated her. It had to be approved by the Senate. And you know what? Her nomination, or her name was recommended by the 2 Republicans in Arizona, Flake and McCain. So it's not like when Barack Obama nominated her for a federal judgeship that it was done because her politics lined up with a Barack Obama. Well, maybe they did. I don't know. But so she gets nominated, and everybody's, oh, look, it's so great. We've got a Native American federal judge, a Native woman as a federal judge. Her first ruling had to do with a highway that was going to run through Native lands, and the Native people were suing to prevent it from happening, and she ruled against the Native people. The highway's getting built. Diane Humatiwa is the one who adjudicated that case. So the expectation that a Native person in a political position as a legislator or as a judge or as a governor is all of a sudden going to take care of Native interests, it ain't going to happen. I mean, and of course, Diane Humatiwa was Republican. I mean, that's kind of what her political stripes were. So that all by itself, is kind of a kick in the head. But even if she weren't, there are plenty of Democrats that legislate against us. Claire McCaskill, Heidi Heitkamp. I mean, the governor of the state of New York here is a Democrat, not exactly a big fan of the Senecas. And in fact, he's not a big fan of Native people, period. So, look, really, I hope Paulette Jordan wins. She seems like a nice person. And, and she's running on the Democratic ticket, so it's already a long shot. I hope she wins. Not because I'm a Democrat, but it seems like she is her. I agree with her politics to the extent that she's running as an American politician, and I'm not an American. Okay, but look, whether I vote in an election, I can still have an opinion about who I'd like to see win a race. And you know what? I hope she wins, but I hope Native people don't take the jump with her. And let me explain. And I've talked about this before. And here's kind of why. Here's the reason why. We can't make the argument that we are sovereign, that we are distinct, that we are autonomous, that we are a distinct people from the state of Idaho or New York, or a distinct people from American politics. We can't say that the Seneca Nation or the Coeur d'Alene or the Navajo or anybody else, that they are sovereign nations if our people are voting in the elections of another nation. And if we're kind of accepting or somehow acknowledging that we're nations, but we're nations within a nation, and that we are an inferior sovereign to the greater sovereign, to the superior sovereign. And that's language that courts have used, where they've said the federal government is the superior sovereign over tribal sovereignty. And you know what? I think that's BS. But we have become so indoctrinated in American politics. We get swallowed up in their patriotism. We get swallowed up in their church and their education and their history that they teach and their politics. Even though we are such a small constituency and could represent such a small voting bloc, there still seems to be an effort every political season to get out the Native vote. And it begs the question, why? Why is it so important? We're never going to swing an election. 1.4% of the electorate or the population in Idaho is Native. You think that small demographic is going to swing the election? It's white people who vote in Idaho. White people are going to swing the election. I mean, again, it's the seventh whitest state in the country. Here in Seneca territory, with New York all around, Mohawk territory, Oneida territory, Onondaga territory, the Native peoples in Long Island, and the Tonawanda Senecas and the Seneca Nation here, we are spread across, and we're a small population anyway, but we're spread across so many what they would call their districts that we are never going to swing an election any place. We aren't going to, help whether it's a state legislator. We can throw money at them. They'll take our money. And you know what? We seem to throw gobs of money. Considering the size of our population, the demographics, there's a disproportionate amount of money that comes out of Native territories into these elections, and it shouldn't. If you're a Native person and your quote unquote tribal government is throwing tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars into state or national elections, you should be pissed. I mean, you should be pissed. Because, and I take a couple of different, there's three reasons why I don't think we should vote in their elections. One is we aren't a big enough population to swing an election anyway. And in doing so, we surrender a piece of our sovereignty. We because we say, oh, we're sovereign, but you still represent us. We're still voting for you to represent us in state legislatures and Congress. So you're still our congressman. You're still our senator. You're still our representative, or our governor, or our president. And you know what? If you're participating in those elections, if the person you didn't vote for wins, you still help put that person in office. You still participate in the process to put that person in office. So you can't say, well, Donald Trump's not my president, I didn't vote for him. You know what? If you participated in that system, then you were part of that system and put him in there. Bottom line, it doesn't matter, because what you're doing is you're participating in the process that yields the victor in these contests. So I mean, you played the game, and whoever wins is your representative because you voted in that. You can't just say, well, I only voted. I'm only gonna, my vote only counts if I win. That's not the way it works. So we diminish our claim to our sovereignty as individuals if we think we can dance in and out of our politics and then and into theirs. So there's that. Again, the other reason is our numbers aren't enough to make any difference. We aren't going to, like I said, even here in Seneca territory, the Seneca Nation's territories spread over 3 counties, and I don't know how many. I mean, and they run their lines. They actually run lines through Cattaraugus and Allegheny, and of course the smaller territories like in Cuba, Oil Springs, that is, or where their the gaming facilities are in Buffalo and Niagara Falls. There are politicians that are going to say, oh, those are part of our congressional district. I would argue otherwise, that Seneca land is not a part of a state legislative district or a congressional district, but they put those lines on the map. But if you look at those lines on the map, they split the territory and the populations up into so many different ways. We would never have any substantive impact on an election. I mean, Senecas only have 8,000 people, and they're spread out in the urban areas like Buffalo or outside of the state. About a little more than half of that population lives on territory, and it's split between 2 territories. Those territories are divided up by white man's lines. We would never make any impact on that stuff. So we can't impact their elections, with our population. But you know what? We help them make the argument. I mean, I had somebody from Niagara Falls say, what do you mean he's not your president? Where do you live? And that gets to my third point. When you register to vote, and you put your address down, if you live on a native territory, what you are saying is not just not their lines on a map, but what you're saying with your voter registration is that your territory is in one of their districts, state or federal, congressional or legislative district. And that's a problem. I mean, maybe out west in Coeur d'Alene, where those lands are held in trust by the federal government for their use and enjoyment, maybe some of those folks don't see the difference. But here, where the Senecas maintain absolute title to their lands, that it isn't a state deed, it isn't a federal deed, it is absolute title to Seneca Nation, to have anybody within the Seneca Nation going to a voter registration booth and saying, yeah, my address on 4 Mile Level Road, or Brant Reservation Road is in such and such a district, and I'm going to register to vote as a Democrat in this district. What you just said, what you told the election boards, what you told New York State, what you told the federal government is that you as an individual are attesting that the property that you live on is a part of New York. It's a part of the United States. And to me, that's a pretty big problem. That's a pretty big problem. And and again, we get into the party politics of all of this, and we aren't served well by either party. I mean, a lot of the problems that we have with here in the state of New York, it's with Democrats. Paul Deister, Democrat. Andrew Cuomo, Democrat. Their tax department, Democrats, appointed by Democrats. Their state attorney general. I mean, these are Democrats. These aren't those hard-nosed Republicans that are racist and nationalistic and all that other stuff. No, these are supposed to be the enlightened ones, right? These are supposed to be the liberals, the flaming liberals. Well, they still have the same conservative views, racist views about Native people that the Republicans do. I mean, I've said this before, that racism is not a right thing. It's a white thing. And you know what? And just like my concern about Native politicians jumping into the American political system and sucking us along with them, the same thing happens with racism. Because there are people of color who actually buy into that sense of white supremacy, even if they're not part of it. Ben Carson, you can bet Ben Carson is down with almost everything that Donald Trump has to say about his racist views, and he's expressed some of that stuff. He looks down at black people because he thinks he's been accepted by the white elite. I mean, he knows he's not white, but he says, yeah, I'm part of them now. I'm part of them now, and they are a superior, and we see this. I mean, you know what? I see that happen to Native people too. I talked about Malcolm X's speech that he gave, where he talked about the house Negro versus the field Negro. Look, if you're running in their election system, you're the Native version of the house Negro, because you aren't the one fighting for your distinction and your sovereignty, and maybe your intentions are, I think I can do more good for my people if I'm the governor of the state of Idaho. I think I can do more good for my people when if I'm in the state legislature, or if I'm a senator. Well, I dare you to kind of look at the track record of Native people who do successfully make that leap. I mean, most people, and I say this, oftentimes on the show, and people got to check it, but most people aren't aware that there was a vice president of the United States who was Native. Charles Curtis, look it up. Vice president under Herbert Hoover, 1929 to 1933. Not exactly a great era for Native people. And you know what he was doing before he was the vice president? He was a Republican senator, and before he was a Republican senator, he was a Republican congressman, all from the great state of Kansas. I mean, some of the legislation that he pushed through eradicated lands in Oklahoma and in Kansas. Not exactly a great voice for Native people. When that book that I've talked about, The Killers of the Flower Moon, when the Osage were being murdered for their money, for their oil money, there were people who petitioned Charles Curtis at the time. Didn't get a whole lot of answers out of Charles Curtis. Charles Curtis wasn't exactly stepping up for the Osage. You look at some of these guys, and look, there's some names that people remember. Ben Nighthorse Gamble, not exactly a guy who, look, he got to put the first shovel in the ground when they built the museum in Washington, D.C. I mean, he's using his fame as a former senator to sell jewelry now or something like that. He almost resented being that go-to or that token Native person, in the Senate. He didn't want to be bothered with that stuff. Yeah, he threw the name Nighthorse in there so people would know who he was, but he would have preferred just to be Ben Campbell. Look, we have to rethink some of this stuff. As people are trying to suck us into the outside politics, or or any people of color. I see, see one of the posts here when I was talking about Ben Carson. Kanye West is another one. And there's a new rapper that was also making a bunch of noise. I can't think of the guy's name, but again, big Trump fans. So, I mean, not only do people vote in against their own best interest, from a party politics standpoint, but I'll maintain over and over again that regardless of party politics, they are not going to legislate in our favor. The Dakota Access Pipeline was conceived, proposed, approved during the Obama administration. The Obama administration, it didn't get completed or fully completed. At the end, he tried to show a conscience, and then put the brakes on, knowing that once he was out of office, Trump was just going to open up the spigot and that oil was going to flow. And the same was going to happen with the Keystone XL pipeline. And these pipelines, they were, folks like Hillary Clinton, she was all for it. She refers to these pipelines as federal infrastructure projects. So when everybody thinks, oh, yeah, the federal government's going to dump $3 trillion into infrastructure, you think they're going to pave the road in front of you, don't you? You think they're going to fix the bridge out on the highway that you have to ride on. No, they're going to build pipelines and a Mexican border wall. That's the infrastructure they're talking about. They're going to do infrastructure that either helps industry, like the oil industry, or upgrading the grid. And I'm not saying that stuff doesn't need to be done, but don't kid yourself to think that when they're talking about these infrastructure projects that it's all about improving the average citizen's quality of life. It isn't. It's about industry. It's about money. And it's either party. It doesn't matter which party it is. So look, I'd love to see Paulette Jordan win the governorship in Idaho. I just don't want to see any Native people go out of their way to make it happen. Because if they do so, what they're saying, especially if they live on territory, that their territory is part of the state, that they are state residents, that they're Americans. She's running as an American politician, a real American, really American is what she says. She's not running as really Native. I mean, she's going to use that and market that. In fact, that's what's all over Facebook. Oh, look, we have this great Native woman, the first Native American woman to run for governor, or could be the first Native American governor in the United States. Well, I don't think so. All right, hey, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we'll take a break and we'll come back after this. We'll have a little more tunage and then get back into it. This is John Kane. So let's talk Native.
Did you ever cry out in the pouring rain? Did you ever feel your life slipping away? Did you ever feel like you're going insane? Oh, then you feel like me. Ever since you went away, did you ever see like daylight never comes. And in the morning light, things still ain't right. All you can do is think of why she ain't here tonight. Did you ever like a knife right through your heart? Yeah. Did you ever reach out for her in the dark?
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. Hey, I want to mention my sponsors, the ones who make this possible. Not just make it possible for me to do this show here on the Cattaraugus territory of Seneca Nation, but I also go to New York each week, and I do a show on WBAI right in the middle of the FM dial, 99.5 in New York City, and I stream that show as well. And that's a talkback. That's a live talkback show. So I take calls from all over, and not just New York City, because we stream that show both on Facebook, and WBAI streams it on their website, WBAI.org. And we get calls from all over the map in terms of topics. Because what I try to do, even with this show, this show is Let's Talk Native, and I. When I word it, it's let's talk native ... So it's native politics, it's native culture, it's native language, it's native issues in general. In New York, it's just let's talk, and what I'm going to provide is a native perspective on many of these issues. And trust me when when I bring up my views about voting, because here was the thing with the last election with Trump and Clinton. I can't say that I hoped Clinton was going to win. I just hoped that Trump wasn't going to win, because I got to know what a moron he was. And, and because I thought that Clinton would win, what I hoped was going to happen was that people just wouldn't turn out, and that it would be a referendum on how little support both of those candidates had. I hoped it was going to be the worst voter turnout ever, and it was pretty bad. It wasn't a very good voter turnout. And of course, Trump wins, not even winning the popular vote. So it certainly puts casts a shadow over his so-called win. But I honestly think when people say, "Well, if you don't vote, you don't have a say," no, I'm with George Carlin on this thing. If you don't like the people are running, don't vote for them. Don't choose this lesser of two evils thing. But this is the kind of the position that I took in New York, and I had liberals and you screaming at me for that, saying that I was that I contributed to that I was partly to blame for Trump winning the election. Look, New York was never going to go for Trump. New York was for Hillary Clinton anyway, so it didn't matter what I said in New York City. But, in fact, that was the view that I took. Clinton was going to win New York State anyway. So why come out in droves to support her? Why give her a huge margin of victory when she was going to have a margin of victory no matter what? That was my point. All right. Hey, let me did I even go through the whole sponsors? No, I didn't. Did I? No, all right. Let me go through. My sponsors are Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. Eric White in ERW Enterprises, Legacy 420 in Tandanega. I've got individuals who make contributions from time to time. Folks like Ed Schindler and Cynthia Trice and Roger Jock, friend of mine from Akwesasne, Neville Spring. And I appreciate the support that I get from individuals because not just the guys who do something weekly, or monthly, but the guys who make a contribution from time to time. Look, sometimes things can get tight, especially considering the trips to New York and that kind of thing. So I appreciate that. And of course, we're into our 8th year right now, and we wouldn't be here if I didn't have the people who have supported us in the past. So Even though there are many of you who have advertised when we were on commercial radio and supported this program, Let's Talk Native, we couldn't have done it without you. We couldn't have done it without. So even if you're not supporting the show, still, I appreciate when you did. And like I said, we have an obligation to educate, and and we take the opportunity to entertain and inform. And those of you who do and have supported this program have made that possible. And I thank you all for joining in the fight and for doing your part. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming. And I want to thank CKWE again for the simulcast and the rebroadcast of this show, as well as Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio. These are primarily internet radio networks. And I want to thank all of you for carrying the program. I also want to thank, and I do this each week, and I feel like I really need to, I want to thank all of you who share the program. My wife reposts this, the Facebook live stream on several of the Native group pages on Facebook. But I know some of you share the SoundCloud audio and the YouTube videos as well. We take this video that we capture for our Facebook live stream, and we edit it down a little bit, take away some of the early part of the show. We go live about 5 minutes early, make sure everything's working properly. So when people are wondering when's the show going to start, that's what you have to do, is be patient. But we trim that off, and we clean the video up a little bit, and we post it on YouTube, on our own YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. So I encourage you to, if you want to see the video in its best form, you can see it on YouTube. And if you have any hiccups with Facebook and sometimes watching the show, that isn't there when you watch the video on YouTube. So check it out, subscribe to our channel, and you can watch the programs that way as well. And I look for your comments. I really do. We don't have a phone system here necessarily. I do have guests that can join me by phone, but I don't really take calls here because it's tough to do it with our setup here. But I do look for your comments on Facebook, and sometimes I won't necessarily get to it till afterwards, but I do see the comments, and so I appreciate those who participate and either acknowledge a comment or criticize a comment, because I know when I'm telling people not to vote in American elections, I think there is a tendency for people to recoil a little bit, but it's not our system. And I don't think there's any benefit to us to our voting. Again, our numbers aren't there. I think it jeopardizes our claim to sovereignty, and we should concentrate on our distinction, on our autonomy. And I'm not just saying let's all vote in tribal elections and not vote. Look, I don't even care if you vote in tribal elections. I mean, if you think, even let's back this up. As if you're an American, and you think going to vote once every couple of years or once every 4 years, that somehow you have checked your box for civic responsibility, I'm sorry, that's a cop-out. Because if you aren't doing things on a daily basis to engage yourself in your civil society, if you think voting gets it done, that's just passing the buck, and oftentimes badly, because people are lying to you to get your vote in the first place. If you're going to, when you cast that vote, you've entrusted somebody else to do the work for you. Well, how about you just do the work? Look after your family. Look after your neighborhood. Look after your community. You want to complain about the cops coming? Stop calling the freaking cops. You want to complain about corruption? Look, every time I hear somebody talk about potholes, you know what? Get a pickup truck and throw some blacktop in the back and fix the pothole out in front of your house. I'm not saying you're going to pave the road, but when I listen to people complain about all of the things that the government isn't doing for them, well, they aren't going to do it for you because you only mattered at election time. And that's what I'm saying to Americans. We have a responsibility in every one of our communities, native or non-native, to fulfill our basic needs. Look, if you think that somebody who passes laws, that their responsibility is to make your life better, regardless of whatever party they're in, you know what? passing the Civil Rights Act didn't make rights appear. Rights either exist or they don't exist. And right along with rights is responsibilities. So it doesn't matter whether somebody had passed a law to tell you to do something. You still have the freedom of choice. We're human beings. We are endowed with certain rights as a function of birthright. Somebody called on my show in New York and they said, people get so hung up on the rule of law that they forget the rules of ethics and morality. And one of the examples was a guy who is disabled. He is blind. And because of the American Disabilities Act, a couple of these villages decided they were going to take out all of the curbs so wheelchairs could have better access crossing street. They didn't just do a ramp, they took the whole curb out. Well, those curbs were the very things that a blind person with their staff could judge where the edge of the road was. So in the end, and when this guy complained to his township, they said, "Hey, I'm just following the law." So they let the law dictate what their actions were going to be, and that had to be expensive. What they did to change, the whole level of sidewalk and all of that stuff. But instead of being a responsible to all disabled people, they just know, I'm just doing what the law tells me to do. It's not my problem. Look, if you get hit by a car, just remember I did my part. I followed the law. I mean, this is the logic of American society, and we want to jump into that as Native people. I got to tell you, there's a lot of problems with that idea. Okay, here's something else. The relationship that we have with the federal government and the state government is still one that is subordinate. I mean, it's funny because in that film, The Doctrine of Christian Discovery, there's a Senator Harlan who speaks, and he says, if these people, meaning Native people, refuse to merge with the superior race, they must be destroyed. So what they said, as an inferior, primitive, inferior people, that if we refuse to merge with the superior race, that we must be destroyed. I mean, that's literally what a U.S. Senator from Iowa said. Now think about that. If we were truly an inferior people, how could we merge with the superior race? They didn't want merger. And you know what? I had a caller in New York who said, he had a problem with the word assimilation. Native people use assimilation all the time because we claim that they're trying to assimilate us. And he said, and his position was, no, they aren't. They were never trying to assimilate you. They were trying to strip your culture away. But they weren't really trying to assimilate. And he has a really good point because, again, for Senator Harlan, he wasn't trying to hope that we would merge with this and be a part of the superior race. He just wanted somebody at the bottom of that. Because if he truly believed we were inferior, where the hell did you think we were going to be on that spectrum of humanity? At the rock bottom, right there. Black people and Native people, right there at the bottom. Because they wanted us to be a part of their social structure, but at the bottom. So when they do the residential schools for over 100 years, do you think that they were trying to turn us into high-standing American citizens? Hell no. The only skill sets that were being taught to women was one where they go out and be somebody's housemaid. They didn't learn any real skills, any life skills. They didn't learn how to be mothers. In fact, they were stripped from their mothers, so they had no, for generations, that whole idea of what that family structure should look like, that relationship between mother and daughter, father and daughter, man, no, that got stripped away with your hair, with your name, with your clothes, with your culture, with your language, all that. Yeah, that all got stripped away. And what we're going to teach you how to do is how to serve white women, how to serve white men. And the guys, what do you think they learned? They learned how to march. The best skill set that they, the main skill set they walked away with from residential schools was to go serve in the military. Do you think they learned do you think they learned how to be bankers in a residential school or lawyers? Hell no. They weren't being taught so they could merge with the superior race. Of course they weren't. They weren't being assimilated into American society. They were being ground down to occupy the lowest part of American society. That's what the residential schools were. That's what American policy has been since day one. So then we think, well, to be real Americans, we enlist in the armed forces. To be real Americans, we can vote in their elections. And what do? We allow more of our native identity to slip away with every passing day. We become the house Negro with every passing day. Look, as this election cycle, heats up for the fall, don't do it. When somebody, and look, when the census comes around, don't cooperate. It's not our system. Everybody says, oh, they need to know our numbers so they can provide more federal funds. You know what? Maybe we need to rethink that. I've heard Native people say, we're not really sovereign because we get federal funding. They don't say that about Israel. They don't say that about, other peoples that get federal funds, or U.S. funding. But we have our own people that buy into this nonsense when it's presented to us. For one thing, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, whatever funding the United States provides or Canada provides Native people, it's owed. They took. They didn't give. And a lot of these are obligations. And you know what? They haven't fulfilled their obligations when it comes to health. They sure as hell haven't fulfilled obligations when it comes to education. And they sure as hell haven't fulfilled obligations when it comes to acknowledging our sovereignty. There's a thing coming up here next week. Next week, the New York State Native Relations Committee. So the New York State Senate Select Committee on State Native Relations. It's coming up next week. You know what? You know what is being proposed, and this is the invitation to Seneca Nation. It says, of particular interest to me, and this is from Joseph Griffo. He's the chairman of this committee. He says, of particular interest to me at this moment are ways in which we can better integrate New York's tribal nations into state policymaking. Integrate. Again, integrate is a euphemism for assimilate. So how can they take us and place them within their systems of policy? Now, he doesn't say in this thing, of particular interest to me is to acknowledge your distinction and how your distinction benefits the regions which that surround your of the state that surround your territories. No, he can't even think that way. His concern is integrating us into their system. Figuring out a way that we fit within New York, and the way that the state can further benefit. And they said that literally, the way that they could benefit from our unique assets. The most unique asset we have is sovereignty, is our regulatory advantages. The reason the Seneca Nation can employ 4,000 people is because of sovereignty. It's sovereignty allowed them to develop gaming. New York State couldn't do it. If New York State had the right to do it, they would have done it all along. They found ways to take market share. But we are forever hell bent in a struggle to defend our sovereignty on things like tobacco, the tobacco industry, our fuel industry, and our gaming industry. We're forever fighting the state over that. We can't get this Senate Select Committee or state legislators or federal legislators to acknowledge that our sovereignty is the main asset that we have. And we have to fight for it every single day. We got to fight against the racism that suggests that we need to be integrated into, because it is. There's a subordinate mindset. And again, Martin Luther King, his conversation to Harry Belafonte at the end of his fight for civil rights, his comment to Harry Belafonte was, "I fear I am integrating my people into a burning house." Even as he started having some success in the fight for civil rights for black people, he started questioning, what am I integrating them in? What I want our people to have a place in this system? That's what he was referring to. I damn sure know that I don't want to be a part of that system. I don't want to be integrated into New York State's policy. I think that they should have policies acknowledging our distinction, not figuring out ways to incorporate us into their policymaking. This is where the struggle is. And when we say, oh, we're going to vote in their elections, or we're going to be good Americans, or we're Seneca, yeah, we're Mohawk, yeah, we're Oneida, but we're Americans too. All right, well, like our identity wasn't screwed up enough. I mean, we got to figure out what kind of Oneida, what kind of Mohawk, what kind of Seneca are you? Tonawanda Seneca? Are you Seneca Nation Seneca? And then you've got other people say, well, if you're Seneca Nation, you're not really Haudenosaunee because they have elected systems. They don't have a chief system, and they say that even though we never had a chief system, we had a clan system. I mean, it's already convoluted enough without us being sucked into the state and the federal systems, into their politics. Now, we are free to have opinions about this stuff. I think the current guy sitting in the White House is an absolute moron. I got to tell you, I get a little pleasure out of watching the United States have such a crappy president. I mean, there's a certain amount of maybe vindictiveness and satisfaction that I get out of seeing Americans get exactly what they asked for in Donald Trump. I do. I got to admit it. And maybe this is the vindictive side of me. But when I see the system failing over and over and over again, why the hell would I want to suggest my people be a part of it? We shouldn't. And I think we should be very clear. Andrew Cuomo is not my governor. He's not the governor of the state he's not the governor of the state that we're residents of. I'm not a resident of New York State. I live in Seneca territory. We have to be more clear about the distinction of our lands, about our culture. We are not a part of the American culture. We aren't. We're distinct. I mean, we are the victims of the American genocide, but that sure as hell shouldn't endear us to the American system and the American policy making, American politics. We're the victims every day of racist diatribes that come from people like Paul Deister in Niagara Falls or Andrew Cuomo in the governor's mansion. The amount of ignorance that exists at state legislature, at municipal government, at state government, and at federal government. I mean, most of these guys have no idea what the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples are or care. They don't even care. I've been kind of going through what the Ramapo are going through in New Jersey and in New York, in terms of the gross amount of contamination that the Ford Motor Plant dumped on Ramapo territory, and how the EPA just looked the other way. Even the EPA under Barack Obama failed these people. So I mean, again, you want to get into the politics of it all. But this is the stuff that we have to be more. We have to rally ourselves for our own issues, and we need to bring people with us, not go with them. I mean, the fact that we fought, the Senecas, launched such a solid campaign, and I don't mean the Seneca Nation. I mean there were Seneca people that launched a solid campaign against the Coudersport Area Municipal Authority, and what was looking like their plan to take fracking wastewater. treat it, quote unquote, treat it, and then dump it into the Allegheny River? We brought non-native people with us. You did. I mean, I'm not taking any credit for this. The people who pushed this thing, they brought non-native people with them. They didn't try to find the politician that they could follow, that could lead the charge. The Senecas led the charge on this thing. So even when there's something off our territory, we need to take responsibility for that. And certainly on our territory, we should be looking at our distinction, our autonomy, and our sovereignty. Now, that doesn't mean that we build a border wall around us and we don't have relationships with the non-native people off our territories. No, it doesn't mean that at all. And it doesn't mean that we have to hate on the non-native people. It's just that we should embrace our distinction. And we should encourage them to embrace our distinction. And understand that we do have attributes of our culture that everybody benefits from. You know, the way we view environmental issues. And they can adopt some of those principles. They don't have to be native to have those ideals. And as we talk about sense of community and responsibility, we should be setting our example within our communities so the outside can say, you know what, we should be doing like them. Not tell ourselves, well, let's go vote in their elections because their systems are so great. Their politics are so great. Their politicians are so great. Oh, the Republicans are this and the Democrats are that. Look, we are free to have our opinions about what these folks do. And like I said, hey, more power to Paulette Jordan. Hope she wins. Don't think she's gonna. I'd rather see here the governor. She's already jumped into the state politics already, so I'd rather her concentrate her efforts back at Coeur d'Alene. But if she's gonna do it, yeah, good luck. Wish you luck. Just don't take a bunch of us with you. That's my view. That's my message for today, folks. So I don't know. We'll see how things play out, and we'll follow some of these things. And I'll even follow the races. I just hope that we don't get sucked into that system. All right. So we will be back here on Monday, and we'll look forward to having something else to cook up. In the meantime, check out the videos, offer your comments, and, we'll have more conversations as we go along. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.